Ok, então bom dia, uma boa tarde, uma boa noite para todo mundo, para todos e todas. Eu não sei quando é que vocês vão assistir isso. Meu nome é Marcos Silva, eu trabalho em Recife, na Universidade Federal de Pernambuco. Eu estou representando aqui o grupo NormAtiva, que é um grupo de pesquisa voltado para discussões sobre normatividade na lógica, na linguagem, também nas ciências cognitivas e com discussões também, consequências políticas, pressupostos políticos em relação à normatividade. E eu também estou representando aqui a Sociedade Brasileira de Filosofia Analítica, na diretoria. Esse é um evento com suporte, né, da SBFA e desse grupo normativo, e é uma grande honra contar com esses professores. Ontem funcionou muito bem com César Moira, lá da Estadual do Norte Fluminense, e com a apresentação do professor Erik Myin. Muito obrigado pelo tempo de todos vocês. Hoje a gente começa com a professora Mariana Broens e depois a professora Maria Eunice, as duas da UNESP, em Marília. E depois da apresentação das duas, vão seguir também, respectivamente, discussões com o Erik Myin, que também está aqui presente. A gente vai para a apresentação do professor André Leclerc. Tá? Então vão ser 3 apresentações, está todo mundo nos bastidores. Vocês podem acompanhar no YouTube, vai ficar tudo gravado também no YouTube. Okay? Switch to English. My name is Marco Silva. I'm representing here the research group NormAtiva, where we research themes connected directly to normativity or normative phenomena in logic, in language, with political things, and also doing some cognitive science, philosophical cognitive science. So this is our NormAtiva Colloquium, where we critically receiving or doing a critical reception for this new book by Erik Myin called Of a Different Mind, which was just published a month ago, less than a month ago, in the MIT Press. So it's a great pleasure to have Mariana Broens from Marília, UNESP, and also Maria Eunice from the same department, philosophy department in São Paulo, in Marília, and also André Leclerc, who is also a good friend and a senior research, very influential, important for us, for my generation. I can speak for myself, for my formal introduction at the university, in the academic life back in Fortaleza. And André Leclerc will also present some thoughts, critical thoughts concerning Erik Myin's new book. So thank you very much, Mariana Broens, for your time, Maria Eunice as well, André Leclerc as well. He's working at the University of Brasilia, and for your time and support, Erik. So it's a great honor to have you here to receive critically receive your new work. So, Mariana, the floor is yours. You have kind of 20 to 30 minutes, and then we go to the discussion with Professor Erik as well. So, thank you. And also thank you, Fred Andrade and Bruno Luiz, and also Thiago Andrade, who are helping me out, supporting this event on the backstage as well. So all these technical things that happen, YouTube, StreamYard, they are running this for us. Okay, thank you. Big thank you for you guys.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank Marcus and Erik for the opportunity to discuss these topics. So thank you very much. Chapter 4, entitled Evolution from Biology to Behavior, Cognition, and Culture, from Erik Myin's book Of a Different Mind, presents central thesis of evolutionary theory from Darwin to the recent contributions of Kevin Lala et al., and the most important impacts of evolution in different fields of psychology and philosophy. With regard to philosophy, the chapter dedicates less than 2 pages to John Dewey's contributions to reflecting on the impacts of Darwinism on philosophy. It may be, however, that the limited number of pages dedicated to Dewey's work is intentional due to its low relevance to the topic discussed. Let us recall some of John Dewey's central theses in his article, The Influence of Darwinism on philosophy before presenting my questions. In his lecture, The Influence of Darwinism on Philosophy, Dewey emphasized that few philosophers have so profoundly modified the concept of science as Charles Darwin and his theories of evolution. He observes that the simple combination of the words origin and species embodies an intellectual revolution and establishes a new conceptual backdrop for understanding natural phenomena. To suggest that different species may have appeared in different temporalities without a prior explicit or implicit purpose, and disappears in the same silent and useless way, sinned against the central dogma of intelligibility, of the rationality of the world, as it was understood until then. Dewey points out that the influence of Darwin upon philosophy resides in his having conquered the phenomena of life for the principle of transition and thereby freed the new logic for application to mind and morals and life. When he said of species what Galileo had said of the earth, e por si muove, he emancipated once for all genetic and experimental ideas as an organ of asking questions and looking for explanations. Dewey reminds us that through Darwinian thesis, we can postulate that there was no single act of creation of species, but that their origin is due to the dynamics of organism-environment interactions. Thanks to the discovery of the relevance of this dynamic, we can understand the constitution of different life forms in relation to multiple environmental conditions and their changes. It does constitute new logic in the sense of offering a new theoretical framework for understanding living beings, their perceptual, cognitive, and social capabilities, and their complex relationships with the environment. Dewey considers Darwin's thesis to be revolutionary insofar as they introduce notions such as chance, impermanence, relational and contextual factors, among others, into the vocabulary of natural science as tools for this new logic in understanding natural phenomena. Until then, the ontological assumptions that guided philosophical and scientific investigation conceived of nature as created according to the perfect plan of an omniscient and omnipotent designer. In this pre-Darwinian logic, to know would be to discover the immutable principles or natural laws of the world's design, elaborated according to the intentions, incomprehensible to us, of its designer. Dewey emphasizes that the central thesis of pre-Darwinian logic seemed supported by observable data, descendants of all then known species, regardless of the geographical distance between them. The notion of species, in the sense, would have been suggested by Aristotle to explain the cycle of structural and functional transmission of living beings to their descendants. The species would indicate a formal activity that operates through a series of changes and maintains them on a particular course towards an end. It also confers unity to nature, transcends distant limits in space and remote limits in time, and guarantees the same uniform type of individuals in structure and function. As a result of the aforementioned and related conceptions, Western culture has produced a conception of knowledge according to which knowing means grasping the immutable essence of beings and the necessary principles that regulate their mutual relations, despite the apparent variability and multiplicity of their contingent properties. According to Dewey, new physical theories and advances in chemistry weakened the essentialist and finalist logic that had reigned for over two millennia in Europe, but in biology, on the other hand, increased acquaintance with the details of plant and animal life operated as a counterbalance and perhaps even strengthened the argument from design. The marvelous adaptations of organisms to their environment, of organs to the organism, of unlike parts of complex organ, like the eye, to the organ itself, these things were increasingly recognized with the progress of botany, zoology, paleontology, and embryology. For those like René Descartes, who defend from a mechanistic and creationist dualist perspective the thesis of animal machines, it seems to be only a matter of time before a theory was found that could explain the properties of living beings in the same way as the explanations of mechanics. However, theories that sought to meet the requirement in biology encountered phenomena that increasingly hindered attempts to explain living beings from a mechanistic perspective. In particular, Abraham Tremblay's studies, published in 1744, on the regenerative capacity of polyps, or reproduction as it was called at the time, thanks to which the polyp is able to regenerate any part it loses, profoundly shook the thesis of the animal-machine analogy. Indeed, the regeneration of the part by polyps showed that the part, in some way, depends on the whole and not the other way around. Conversely, when a part of an artificial machine breaks, a clock spring, for example, the clock simply stops working, which shows the dependence of the whole on its component parts. It is not expected that the internal organization of the clock will reproduce the damaged spring. The publication of The Origin of Species raised controversies in the world of science in general, precisely because of the shake-up it caused to the previously successful alliance between mechanistic and theological metaphysical theses. Dewey emphasized that when Darwin points to strong empirical evidence that the phenomena of life are centered on the principles of transition, he exerted a profound influence on Western thought, allowing the application of this new logic not only to the understanding of the variability of species over time and space, but also to the understanding of the mind, knowledge, culture, and morality. The problems faced by the strictly mechanistic approach and its pact of peaceful coexistence with substantial dualistic ontologies and creationism led the nascent field of biology to seek explanatory alternatives, such as vitalism, for example, proposed at the end of the 18th century. But it was only in the second half of the 19th century that Darwin, upon publishing his Origin of Species, according to Dewey, challenged the logic of knowledge of the world that had been hegemonic until then, and he did so precisely in biology, including human beings. To sum up, Dewey emphasized that the simple combination of the words origin and species embodied an intellectual revolution in philosophy and established a new conceptual backdrop for understanding natural phenomena. In this new backdrop, according to him, notions such as chance, impermanence, relational and contextual factors challenge the then prevailing theistic and mechanistic metaphysics. Darwinian theories particularly challenge the anthropocentrism ingrained in Western philosophy culture, one of the reasons why evolution still receives undeserved criticism today. The impacts of evolution on philosophy, as foreseen by Dewey, seems to be present in contemporary conceptions of perception and cognition. For example, when the ecological theory of perception action severely criticized mechanistic approaches that do not take co-evolutionary mutualism into account in their models. In this new context, knowledge involves an interdisciplinary effort based on a common vocabulary that needs to take into account the complex and dynamic relationships between the elements, parts, or agents of a system, their emergent properties, and modes of organization and information exchange. After this summary of some of John Dewey's central thesis, I would like to pose the following questions. Erik, do you consider Dewey's reading of the relevance of evolutionary theory to Western philosophy, allegedly establishing a new logics, to be accurate? Would you agree with the hypothesis that one of the main contributions of Dewey's text on the impact of Darwinism on philosophy is the critique of classical mechanism? And finally, it seems to me that Dewey's criticisms of metaphysics, especially regarding the impact of Darwinism on theories of the nature of the mind, find an echo in the perception action theory and also in the 4E cognitive approaches. But do you agree with this hypothesis? That's my questions. And I would like to make some final remark that I really appreciated the reference to Darwin's study of earthworms in the section Evolution of Action and Intelligence, in which you point out that Darwin attributes mental qualities and powers to them. Thank you very much. Thanks for your attention.
Okay, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes?
I am now, I had uploaded the slide, but I had to, okay, there it is, I think. But it's not, yeah, I'll answer your questions. I do have a few slides which I thought might be relevant. They will be, but let me briefly react. You said so many things which I was disconnected for like 40 seconds at most, but I think I got everything with the text on the. No, there's so much that I agreed with in your presentation. I'll answer your questions, but you said that. Well, that's the first. Actually, that's the first question. You said that my treatment of this paper by Dewey was very brief, and that might point to the fact that I found it of not being very relevant. But it was just brief because I had to be so selective in what I put into the book. I have many parts that are, I think, would have fitted perfectly, and they're in a file. They're in on my computer, but I impossibly could fit them in. So I had to condense everything. And what I tried to do in my treatment was to give the gist of that what I thought was the gist of that paper, and I think it resonates with a lot of what is said in the book afterwards. There are a lot of
Yes.
ways in which you see that what is in that short treatment is in the back of the mind of the writer when subsequent parts are written. So absolutely think that the article is very relevant, and I agree as your first question that it establishes. Well, I agree with the claim that it establishes a new logic. What is a new logic? Well, a new ways of thinking. Yeah, it calls for new ways of viewing, and it calls for thinking with other rules in mind. That's the broad idea of logic here. With other guidelines for thinking in the future because of evolution. You have this abandoning of narrow categories. But the basic criticism, I think, a basic criticism is really, I see a criticism of Platonism and of the deductive knowledge as a kind of attitude, and that's really a criticism. I try. Well, it's a critique of the abstract first, as if we can have an abstract understanding first, and then understand everything in the concrete world according to our pre-existing knowledge or pre-existing knowledge, abstract knowledge, and I think he tries to reverse that picture, and it also very much fits with his critique of reification, because the philosophical attitude of abstracting is a reification. It's making what you abstract from the concrete as eternal and unchanging. And that's a logic of thinking which is very much in a lot of science, a lot of mechanistic science of his days. I think that concerns your second question, and in a lot of philosophy. But in philosophy, it's harder. It's harder to. I think, well, for many reasons, I think it seems harder to undo it, right? Than in science. And I think what's so great about Dewey, about Dewey's paper, is that he addresses it in science and in philosophy. So in philosophy, that's the most general logic of thinking, right? And in science, and that's your second question, well, yeah, this kind of rigid laws of nature as something outside of nature, that's how I read mechanism, or it's a rigid system, right? And laws of nature are in a way more fundamental than nature. I see it that way. While and you can see that as but I'm sort of speculating now, but it's totally in the spirit of Dewey, I think, and it's the way I now would see his criticism of the mechanistic science. This rigidity is based on absolutizing an abstraction, a certain picture of the natural world which you have abstracted and which you absolutize. But given the advancement of knowledge and what we find out about the natural world, we see that we have to revise that. And the borders of thinking should be opened and should should allow things that weren't allowed or are in tension with the mechanistic worldview. Yeah, but that's sort of an application of the critique or the call for a new logic, but which is very, I think it's very, and it's all grounded in a respect for the concrete, right?
Yes.
It's the concrete world that is evolving, and it's evolving in an open-ended way. And because it's so open-ended, which doesn't mean it's random or so, but it's there's more than we had expected or more than we had considered. It's because it's so open-ended that we have to realize that our fixed. In abstracting, we're always running behind, right? Sort of, or we have to adapt our abstractions constantly to the concrete because it can behave or in unexpected ways. And the attitude he's criticizing, I think, is that we already know what it is in the abstract, or we already know how the general contours are, and then we have that, and we can approach the concrete from that. And he reverses that, I think, and he points to that's very consistent. He points to the concrete world itself. Look at the world, right? It's not operating according to your logic, and we're learning that. So adapt your thinking to that. That's what I would. It's well, in my terminology or the slogans which I use, it's against an abstraction first approach. And that's completely in line with anti-reification. Third question. Yeah, if you don't have any intermediate questions, no.
No. I know you appreciate Dewey's work because you mentioned him 47 times in the whole book. I counted it. But my doubt was about the relevance to the discussion of this specific topic, the relevance of Darwinism in philosophy.
Yeah. I think it's fair. Well, I already said, and I think, and I'll return to that. But first, I think there's as you say, there is a perfect parallel between what Darwin points to in evolution and the approaches which I try to give more attention than usual textbooks, and clearly I'm favorable to them in the book, the embodied approaches, etc. Well, and take the dynamical system approach to cognition. It too consists in a processual developmental view of cognition. It's something which is only it forms, and it's constantly in the process of forming. So and the criticism of cognitivism really is in line with the criticism of reification, which comes from you can't, before the product is there, the plan according to which the product was going to be produced was not there. In hind, it's not. Well, that's the historical fallacy. You make the product, some internal rendering of the process into the cause of the product, right? An internal plan which leads to intelligent action can fulfill that role, and it's a role that is exactly equivalent to the role of the designer in evolution, right? And it's by the same kind of reasons that it's taken away in evolution and in these approaches to cognition. You point at the process and the open-endedness and the becoming. So yeah, it's and yeah, and I think that kind of approach it's present in dynamical systems. It's present in much of in activism. It's present in ecological ecological psychology. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's thoroughly in the spirit of Dewey.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wait a second. I have prepared some slides.
Okay.
So you said I cite him a lot, but here is another quote which I have already in chapter 1, in which I love and which I think is present in the whole work. He said, reason is not an antecedent force which serves as a, I don't know how to pronounce, panacea or something. It's a laborious,
yes, as
laborious achievement of having
remedy.
There you have him applying his evolutionary approach or mindset or attitude to cognition, and that's perfect. And this is against the idea of that the abstract is there before the concrete, which was the basis for dualism, right? It was always
Exactly.
That's what I tried to emphasize in the beginning of the book. Why this dualism? Oh, it's because of abstraction. And I find this kind of emphasizing of dualism to be of abstraction to some position which smells of dualism. It's still present in ideas of cognition as an implementation of a computational process, an abstract computational process, because then the process is the prior existing, the more fundamental thing, which then gets implemented in the concrete. There you have this with respect to Dewey, bad inversion, return to the inversion of abstract and concrete, which Dewey fought.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think, and finally, almost finally, in my final chapter, the small 2 pages, which are in chapter 12, and which I called "Forever in the Loop," and which has as a motto, the subtitle, "The end has no end." It's sort of the idea is, cognition itself is never ending. It keeps on evolving, and our understanding will change, and it will change forever. And we have to revise what you call the logic of understanding, because we did so. And Dewey points that out in his article, and you referred to it. We already changed our ideas of understanding quite sometimes throughout the history of science. And we'll have to continue to do so. And what we now find problematic might turn out not to be problematic once we have different ways of connecting insights and once we have new material. But we have to pay more attention to the concrete and to how it evolves. Yeah, that's all. That's really the spirit of the book, I think, and that's why I wanted absolutely to include this this short treatment of Dewey, but then I cited him 40 times, 47
times in the whole book.
Well, there you go.
Okay. Now, thank you, Erik.
Thank you very much.
Okay, guys. Thank you. Maybe I would like to just pose another question for this session. Mariana Broens, and I would like to hear more on her thoughts and Erik's thoughts on an attack on Platonism, because in a sense, some Platonists, they are very much interested in how mathematicians reason and how they discover things in their own narrative. Yeah. So a kind of abstract reality, which is definitive and can be discovered by the minds of these very smart people, adult people, smart and linguistic competent people with very remarkable techniques and doing stuff. But then I think one of the interesting things in this shift to pragmatism, as Mariana presented and Erik also discussed throughout his work and book now, is that pragmatism is not that much interesting in what the mathematician does. Yeah?
It depends.
Yeah, but in the sense that how they discover any kind of essence which is uncovered by the appearance of phenomena, or they are trying to find out the reality. But once we go back to as Erik put here, some biological things and concrete things and historical things and revisable things in the contingent world, there is a shift there. And in a sense, mathematics does not really play the role that played before in any kind of more Platonistic tradition. We start with concrete stuff, and then maybe at the end we can explain what the mathematician does or do with in terms of technique and not in terms of discovering structures. But in a sense, for a Platonist, they really have a good account for abstract entities, in a sense. And this, from a philosophical point of view, these abstract entities, the kind of explanation, is, from a philosophical point of view, is very influential in a sense.
Yes, until today.
The pragmatist is kind of it's a whole challenge in the methodology in a sense. We start with more revisable, biological structures, historical ones, and then we try to find out what we can do with these more abstract things, with mathematics and more formal logic in a sense. Once the Platonists start with these entities, these abstract entities, these essences, and then if they have time or interest, they talk about revisable things, but sometimes they do not really have interest in this kind of stuff.
But
so how do people think about mathematics and all this concern? I would like just to hear a little bit more about that stuff.
Okay. Are your the questions for Erik or for both?
For you both, guys.
Okay.
I would like to hear more.
You start, Mariana. I certainly want to answer also, but go ahead, you first.
Yeah. Well, I said that this is a tendency that remains until today, but now this discussion is posing upon the nature of information. So the nature of the ontology of information. And Eunice and we have a lot of discussions of this topic, and I have a personal joke saying, well, you are more Platonic and I am more Aristotelian, because I think that information and the bearer of it have a kind of natural and necessary relation between them. They are not information flying in the air or something like this, as Platonic ideas, that there are a true strong connection of information with its bearer. And Eunice says, no. Information has its own ontology as formal mathematical entities. Okay, she's disagreeing with me now, but information has its own ontology. And I'm questioning about, well, we have two different worlds again. And this is my disagreement with this Platonic or more Platonic approach of information. But it's basically a similar discussion that remains until today. The fight between a more formal point of view, as Plato did, and a more situated, embodied point of view, as Aristotle proposed. That's it. But thank you for your question, Marcus.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, that was relatively moderate. I think I'm much more radical here. Well, let me not be comparative. I'm pretty radical about Platonism and mathematics, etc. There's a lot of work that I want to do on this, so it might be more furious well, it might be a lot of attitude, but I'll produce the work, and I already have done some work. But one thing that always strikes me as extreme on the side of Platonists is the claim that they have a better explanation than whoever. Because to refer to the existence of abstract objects, totally mysterious, hovering in some distant abstract world, an extreme dualism in which you can't have absolutely no idea of how the concrete and the abstract come together, it does not offer any explanation at all. If I say about two chairs, if I ask you the question, hey, why is this chair like this one? And you say to me, oh, because there's the form chair in the one and the form chair in the other, and that's the same thing. You just have reified the similarity between those things into a thing, and you have to explain nothing. You've made a mistake. You produce a fallacy as if it was a grandiose explanation. I'm sorry, I get too excited about it. I really
okay.
Platonists have no explanation whatsoever about mathematics. They just posit it. It's a mathematics first approach, and they don't advance 1 inch. What's the solution? A pragmatist or an inactive or a radically embodied account of how people came to engage in mathematical activities, which led them to think that there were mathematical objects. And a lot of mathematics is, I have written some papers on this, is procedural. It begins with counting. It begins with ways of doing things according to certain norms. And when that develops, you get things like infinity. But what is infinity? Well, ask a Platonist. Well, there is abstract infinity. That doesn't explain anything. But if you have a procedural understanding of infinity, you can get a grip on it. What is infinity? What does the word infinite mean in mathematics? It's something like, I can always make it bigger. If you write a number, I can write a bigger number. Therefore, there's an infinite amount of numbers. And that's a procedural notion. It means, and that's the advantage, it has a clear meaning. You can always make a bigger one. Yeah, right. Now I understand infinity. I don't understand it by following the Platonic explanation. And I think similar ideas go for other mathematical things. One more thing about mathematics, and I might return to it. If you are a Platonist, you have this enormous problem. How is it possible that mathematics applies to the real world? If you have a pragmatic, embodied view of mathematics, there's no problem whatsoever, because mathematics is from the beginning embedded in the things we do, like counting, like adding something. It's like it becomes the question: how does mathematics apply to the real? It becomes like, how can the rules of chess apply to the real world? That's a very silly question, I think. And for comparable reasons, the mathematical question is like that, though there are differences between chess and mathematics, but also similarities which make the question problematic. That's all I want to say.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, Mariana. Erik now shows all the anti-Platonistic point of view.
Very, very strong, and I personally I appreciate Plato a lot. I disagree with him in some things, but I'm not I'm not going so far in my criticism as you, Erik.
Erik is a radical.
No, I can appreciate Plato actually when I read him, but it's these explanatory claims I really can't make sense of them.
Okay.
Okay.
I think it's extraordinary to claim that Platonism has explanatory advantages.
Maybe our next colloquium we're going to be on Platonism, so Erik can develop in a full way his blows against attacks against Plato. It will be a therapeutical group, yeah. So, Andrea, maybe you want to make some remark or a question with you. I don't know. Maybe Andrea is not hearing what I'm saying. Mariana,
No.
Can you
Yes.
talk to him to ask you if he want to make any kind of question, and then we can do the technical problems. O som está desligado.
Agora eu vou colocar aqui mesmo a apresentação da Eunice. Então, deixa eu ver.
Okay. Let's do a pause now, maybe 5 minutes for toilet, water, coffee, stretching the legs, having beautiful cats here and petting them. Okay, and then we come back in 5 minutes with Maria Eunice presentation. Mariana, você vai ter que tirar esses slides para Maria Eunice poder colocar também.
Eu não coloquei nenhum isso. Agora eu vou colocar o da Eunice.
Precisava tirar a inversão da imagem do slide 17. Né? Está vendo que é invertido lá embaixo da figura? Está invertida a citação, está de cabeça para baixo.
Eu não sei se eu vou poder. Não tenho, assim, não
então
sei.
Tira a figura e tira a figura.
Não, só tira.
Não pode ter citação, sim.
Não, nem sei.
Citação, Mariana. Tira tudo. Fica a figura, tira tudo.
Marcos, você está me ouvindo? Sim? Eu continuo tendo problemas para ouvi-lo, né?
Ok. Você consegue me ouvir agora?
Fazer o quê?
Não. Não ouve. Ouve? Não. Tá. Okay. No worries. Okay, guys. Let's start to the second part of the second. Let's start the second part of our session. This morning session in Brazil. For Erik, is already afternoon there in Antwerp. It's a great pleasure and honor to introduce Professor Maria Eunice Gonzales. He's a good friend, somebody who I respect a lot, whose work I also respect a lot. So it's a great pleasure to have you here, Mariana. Mariana is professor at the philosophy department in the UNESP in Marília, São Paulo, and she will present some slides on the nature of ecological laws in the context of humanoid robotics, notes inspired by Erik Myin of A Different Mind. Thank you very much for your time and your attention, Maria Eunice. You have kind of 20 to 30 minutes, and then we go to Erik Myin's reaction to your reactions of this book. Thank you.
Pelo convite. Thank you, Erik, for the opportunity to be inspired of some of problems I'm going to bring for our discussions. And I also would like to thank my collaborators, Mariana, people confuse Mariana with Maria Eunice, and Arthur, Juliana Moroni, Renata, people from GAEC, or Academic Group of Cognitive Studies, from UNESP, people from the group CLE, self-organization, and also all the anonymous people who are a great source of my inspirations. Thank you. I would like to 2 points, 2 questions practically. First of all, in chapter 3, Erik presents the Cartesian philosophy in a beautiful, very clear way, the distinction of mind and body, highlighting then the mechanical nature of the animal body, in contrast to the human mind that's endowed with soul. So, inspired by this passage in his book, I will discuss these 2 points, and also in chapter 10. So the first point is the test of action and language. I'm going to present that according to Descartes, would always allow us to distinguish humans from machines. This test will be discussed and investigated now in the contemporary context of humanoid robotics. And the second point is Erik's mention on the ecological psychology. So I will address the distinction between ecological and physical laws now in the context of humanoid robotics. So we will start with 2 problems that I would address particularly to Erik to think about it. If can the Cartesian test of action and language allow us to distinguish humans from humanoid robots in the 21st century? And the second problem or question, is there a distinction between ecological and physical laws in humanoid robotics? So I will discuss these 2 problems in 3 steps. First, I'll introduce very briefly the Cartesian test of action and language. And then I will go on Erik's hypothesis concerning Gibson's ecological perspective on perception and action. And finally, we'll go on to humanoid robotics, addressing the distinction between ecological and physical laws in this context. So for the first point, as it's clear in Erik's chapter 3, reason is one of the main characteristics of human being. It allows generalization and the capacity to critically direct language and action. And the point is that reason is absent in beasts and machines. That's Descartes' perspective. And so Descartes says, at any time, we will have two tests to distinguish humans from machines. And in the discourse of method, he stresses the generality, universality of language and action, which will then distinguish humans from beasts and machines. And I quote, it says, if there were machines bearing the image of our bodies and capable of imitating our actions as far as it's morally possible, there would be still remain two most certain tests whereby to know that they were not, therefore, really men. The first one is the language test. And he says here, for it is a very remarkable thing that there are no men, not even the insane, so dull and stupid that they cannot put words together in a manner to convey their thoughts. On the contrary, there is no other animal, however perfect and fortunately situated it may be, that can do the same. And he goes on, not merely animals have less reason than men, but they have not at all, none at all. So that's Descartes' very strong point in the language test. And for the arguments on the diversity and generality of action, it says the second test is that, I'm quoting, although such machines might execute many things with equal or perhaps greater perfection than any of us, they would without decisions of their organs. For while reason is an universal instrument that is alike available in every occasion, these organs, on the contrary, need a particular arrangement for each particular possible, and this impossible is strong, that there should exist in any machine a diversity of organs sufficient to enable it to act in all the occurrence of life, in the way in which our reason enables to act. That's Descartes, page 8. So, for the first problem. Can the Cartesian test of action and language allow us to distinguish human from humanoid robots now in the 21st century of humanoid robotics? Oh, in the case of language tests, the large language models such as ChatGPT, Gemini, and others, this seems to pass in the Turing test. Despite including nonsense and misinformation, I have noticed that even people that we consider it a certain intelligence cannot distinguish what a machine, or ChatGPT says, or Gemini, and others produce from what a human would produce. So I'm not completely certain, but I think that the language test here, the Descartes language test, is pending with new evaluation. And I would like to know if Erik agrees with that. Now, from the human action, the problem seems to be a little bit deeper. It seems that human action differs from humanoid robotic movements in the capacity to select, or not just movement, but performance in the capacity to select critically direct action and generalize what has been learned in diverse contexts and situations. So it seems that Descartes' test on action seems to be alive here. So the point is that on its own, without attunement to evolutionary, social, environmental, and ethical context, a performance or a movement is not sufficient to characterize an action. So it seems to me that so far, Descartes' human action test is still alive, but I'm very curious to know what Erik thinks about that. So let's go to part 2. So Erik's hypothesis on Gibson's ecological psychology. Now in chapter 10, Erik summarizes ecological psychology hypothesis concerning perception and action, arguing that in the study of perception, we should not start by imposing the categories of physics on animal perception, given that it involves the complex interaction of organism environment. I agree completely with Erik at this point. I'm originally a physicist. My first experience was in physics, and it seems very clear to me that we cannot start studying information, action, and perception from the strictly physical perspective. We should not forget about physical laws, of course, but there seems to be a little bit more to be considered in the study of perception and action. So I thought when I was reading Erik's book, his summary on Gibson's ecological psychology, he doesn't go very, very far, but this point is essential for me regarding perception and action that indicates a distinction between ecological and physical laws. And this distinction inspired me to think that it's very relevant to think about our problem. If there is a distinction between ecological and physical laws in the context now of humanoid robotics. There is a distinction, yes, but there is a relevant distinction in the context of humanoid robotics. I'm curious to know what Erik thinks about that. So, just in a very brief way, the distinction sketched here between the Cartesian and the ecological perspectives on perception and action. It is very clear in chapter 3 that the Cartesian perspective, we have body, word, and mind are understood as independent. There is an interaction there, but it's a little bit mysterious. And now, in contrast with the ecological psychology and also the embodied dynamic model, mind, world, and perception action are dynamically connected, and they have to be studied from the perspective of this connection. So the question is that if there is a difference between ecological and physical laws, what are ecological laws? So we have to answer this question in several levels. At the methodological level, perception, action, I understand, and I think people from ecological psychology would agree that we have to study ecological laws in terms of reliable regularities, that is constitutive of meaningful information. And the key word here is meaningful information. So this kind of information, as Gibson says, meaningful information, cannot be encompassed by the simple equations of mechanics and physics. So ecological laws, as Petrus and Turvey in this beautiful article of 2000 says, they are not Newtonian in character, and their descriptions require complexity. and flexibility with respect to certain formal and philosophical commitments. This philosophical commitments is also important. So what are the properties of this complexity? So first, this, at the methodological level, ecological laws might be explained from the perspective of complex systems involving at least meaningful information, self-organization, emergence, and circular causality. We have other elements, but I think this will be sufficient for our discussion. So on meaningful information, Mariana was saying that we have a deep discussion about the ontological nature of information. We are not going to debate this now here, but we can talk about the meaningful information at this methodological level and also at epistemological level. Right? To talk about meaningful information, people like Gibson, Turve, and others, they bring about the notion of affordance. As it's known for many of us, this term was proposed by Gibson to express information, meaningful information, that is available in environment that indicates possibilities for action. And we have several other definitions of affordance, but what interests me related to information is that affordance are dispositional properties. They are not really material there. They cannot be broken with hammer. They are dispositional properties of the environment. Their actualizing conditions includes the abilities of animal embedded in their niches. And depends, in this picture, which is common to us, if you are a cat, you will see, I don't like cats very much. I love them, but not with Mariana's nose. So I can see these stones as several possibilities for the rat, for instance, to hide from the cat, the man to do, I don't know, with stones, but there are many possibilities. But it depends on the context in which their niches is embedded in. So affordance are very, very important. They are the key words to understanding meaningful information. And so in order to perceive, quote more or less Petrus and Turve, perceiving of an affordance to occur, the organism cannot just perceive itself, nor even just itself and its surrounding. The organism must perceive that those around means to it. What is the meaning of this around? What those around mean to it? Perception for action is therefore irreducibly semantic in character. That's a big distinction from the physical laws. So according to Gibson, meaningful information is a resort that has a resort. It's beautiful, the non-anthropocentric perspective of ecological psychology. Human beings are one amongst many other animals. So the world is full of meaningful information, directing, affecting, constraining action in specific niches that encompass affordance. So the questions that affordance are meaningful in virtue of what? They are meaningful, and here is the dispositional properties, in virtue of the mutuality principle. This is a very, very, very important point. The mutuality principle that connects animals and environment, co-evolving and allowing the emergence of niches. So niches differs from environment in the sense that it leaves the marks memory of action there. So animals and environment co-evolve, allowing this emergence of niches. And the question here is, could humanoid robots now grasp or deal with the mutuality principle? I am shaking here with a positive answer. So I go on now to the third part to allow the discussion then about the humanoid robotics, on the distinction between ecological and physical laws. So ecological laws are emergent from the niches in which the organisms are embedded. And are they a real possibility? So ecological laws, then we saw, are the organism's ability to create and modify habits of action, perception, but above all, the change happens, the relevance, as for survival in accordance with the mutuality principle. And the problem is that when the mutuality principle does not operate properly, organisms attune to the wrong affordance, and they fail to control the proper aspects of their actions. So the attunement is also a very important point in that. And now I bring to you this image of this robot, which can play several martial arts. I haven't seen any robots so far playing Tai Chi Chuan, but I saw other judo, karate, and others. This robot seems to play in a satisfactory way and dangerous way, because it can kill somebody. And at the social level, we have humanoids that have perception action. For instance, Melody and Ari, these robots, they can interact with their owners amongst common at emotional level. They can speak, they can cry, they can laugh, they can discuss in several languages what is of interest of their owners. And they can be bought. There is at the market now, I heard that it costs not too much, $30,000, around that, and you can put them in your luggage and bring with you. Aya can even do beautiful movements like shaking hands, shaking hair, and other elements, focus on the eye, and can operate at a certain emotional level. So the question is there, are they picking up the right affordance when they interact with their owners? But what really makes me feel more confused now is with this Gabi, the Buddhist humanoid robot, the first one that was now operating in South Korea. And it can touch people, do reverence, as you can see for the picture. Gabi is doing what a human would take at least 10 years or so to practice kind of attitudes, to be a proper Buddhist person. This Buddhist robot now can just be created as a Buddhist robot according to certain technicians. And people are happy with that. If you notice, not the very ancient Buddhists there, but the young people are very happy with this. And so what kind of affordance is available here? I don't know. I'm thinking about that. I don't have the answer, and I would love to ask Erik if he has some answer. Why even Pope or people from religious sector now are concerned, because it seems that they have always been in power, and now they are not so much powerful as they used to be when the humanoid robots started to act in different sets of religions. So this AIDA humanoid robotics that has a long history. We're not going to talk about this, but her paintings interacting with other people is a huge price into the market. People are really appreciating that. So just to conclude this very short notice, I would like to ask again, Erik, several questions. That it seems to me that in both, in the Cartesian theater or in the Cartesian philosophy, and also in the current large language models, there seems to be homunculus to interpret images and words. Not only the infinite regress, Ryle problems on infinite regress that people from ecological psychology try to eliminate the infinite regret by putting direct perception. But the homunculus problems seems to be present not only in Descartes, but also in the large language models and in the robotics. Humanoid robotics, because most of them need a programmer to not only create them, but to control them at distance. But even the humanoid robots that had a certain degree of autonomy, they also need reinforced learning and others emergent properties programmed by the human being that operates, I think, like the homunculus. So the big question I am asking myself and you all people, if this physical general artificial intelligence, now at the robotics we have the Turing artificial intelligence test that seems to do with language somehow at the abstract level, but now we have the physical general artificial intelligence that can, the idea is that robots would learn how to cook, how to dance, how to play several paintings, how to do many other things simultaneously. But it seems that Descartes point on their specific tools embedded in their physical structure has to be put there. So the question is that will be then fed by affordance, these super general AI robots, will they avoid Ryle infinite regress problems, and also with the homunculus? It seems to me that the action level, Descartes is still alive. No. I thank you for the opportunity again, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Can I begin?
Yeah.
Marcos, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Based on your abstract, I've made some slides, and I think with some extra explanation from myself or some addition, they can serve. I sort of, yeah, they can serve. I can say what I want to say by adding a little bit at the, well, adding some, not adding stuff at the end of my slides, but I need to get them going. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. So thank you very much. Okay. This is all clearly related to the book, though I don't deal with robots exactly, but here's how I would use material from the book to give you an answer. And I think sort of the answer is present in places in the book, but it's what I say now adds to it or develops it a little bit. So advances, you have Descartes and his two tests, good and very nicely distinguished by you. First question or first issue which you raise is advances in AI and language. And the question is, do LLMs show that machine can language? I mean, you have this group who talk about languaging, can engage in languaging like humans can engage in producing linguistic activities like humans do, and you're sort of you say Descartes. Well, that's what I take. Descartes says no, but given the current developments, we should be we should be cautious about, and we perhaps should change our mind regarding Descartes' answer. Yeah, that's what I take from it. Here's a, well, if you ask me the question, do LLMs show that machines can language like humans? Here's a qualified answer, which I think, which I would give, and which is based on the kind of thinking that's in the book. Well, they do show that they can produce output that cannot be distinguished from humans. But there's also the interesting question, I think, are these produced in the human way? Do we, I know the LLMs are very roughly based on neural networks, and there will be some similarities in their processing, but also quite some dissimilarities, I think, between their processing and real neural activity. And neural activity is embedded in a body in which the gut and metabolism and I don't know what all plays a role, which is abstracted from in the LLM way of operating. So there are certainly many differences in the way the outputs are produced. Okay, there are many differences, and they might not show up directly in the outputs, but it might be that what they do is not operate or deal with language in the way humans do, human brains do, if you wanted, human bodies do. Well, there might, and that's there's many arguments to be given that they might just recombine the mass of human outputs which have fed human outputs, which are texts present on the internet, which are fed to them. They might just recombine them according to regularities that are in what is in the human output, so in their input. Yeah, that's a way to achieve, and I think it's the way we actually achieve humanesque output, indistinguishable outputs. So we should not too hastily conclude from a form of output equivalence to a form of producer equivalence. Okay, so yeah, it's a very traditional philosophical point, I guess, and I think that and many philosophers would agree with me. Well, for once, I agree with many philosophers. Well, I do a lot of times, of course. Output equivalence is not all that matters in order to declare the arrival of human-like language processing or human-like language capacities. Okay, the capacity. Well, we should distinguish in the producing the output and how it is produced, and the difference might matter in many ways. Something that I think is very important is that we should not, and that will return. We should not forget that LLMs are products of human cognition. Okay, you should not think of them as a model for human cognition, because they are things that we have engineered, perhaps partly based on insights we have on how we think human cognition works. But these are things we have produced to produce certain outputs. They're late technological products. They are products of our cognition, right? So it would be far-fetched and sort of an inversion to begin to see these kinds of artificial systems as the embodying sort of the essence of the secret to intelligence. And I'm saying this, where do I do this one? No, I'll have this one later, yeah, sorry. I had to make my slides this morning. I haven't really elaborated them, but this thing that I'm pointing out is very relevant. Is relevant with respect to the LLMs, but more in general, it's relevant with respect to computers. I think what you have this computational view of the mind in which the brain is seen as a computer, but that's a weird thing, because in my opinion, which is also present in the book, it's us that have constructed computers. And if you look at Turing's work, when he invented or developed or described or presented the Turing machine, he clearly writes that he models his machine on the activities of a man in the process of computing. So it's human activity that is modeled by a computer, right? So the computer is the model of the human, is the derivative of the human thing. But if you say that the brain is like a computer, it seems like you are modeling the original thing on the derivative thing. And that's a strange thing. And here's a kind of a joke which was shown to me recently in a lecture on art, but it's very comparable to this, right? This young guy does exactly what we tend to do, or what I think the computational view of the mind does to us. It treats the derivative thing as the origin of the original thing, right? And I can see that at work in the computer image, and you can apply that to LLMs. Okay, and here's a way to add a bit detail or add a bit perspective on that idea of producer equivalence and what would be needed in order for LLMs to be more like humans, not only in the production of outputs, but in the way in which it's produced. Well, you could say, and that's something that many people have said, well, they're not really engaging in cognition because they lack the organic structure for cognition. What is the organic structure for cognition? Well, I'm in sympathy with what you can call original, autonomic, autopoietic enactivists who say that cognition is always happening in living systems, and living systems have this special structure from which cognition is a later product. And what is this special structure? It's this self-creating structure in which a whole system works to recreate itself permanently. And you have a natural, well, and it's this, they have this the elements of the system have these special tight relations with each other, these self-producing relations. The whole system, the black system as a totality, interacts with the environment, but the environment is not created by the system in the same way in which the elements of the system create itself. It's an idea which you already find in Immanuel Kant, but it's been developed in philosophy by these activists. And you could say, and that will turn important, I think, also for assessing ecological versus physical laws, you could say that this substrate is necessary in order to have, in the first place, action, in the first place, to have goals. With such a system, you have a goal. The system naturally strives to continue its own existence. So you have a perspective of the system, namely that of the existence of the system itself, in which it tries to do things to perpetuate itself, and then that can complexify by means of interactions with the environment, in which it takes from the environment what better serves its organic needs. You can have the creation of sensory organs, motor organs, that all helps and that complexify what the thing does, all in a teleological framework, which is at the very basis of which is its own existence and its continued and the continuation of that existence. Okay, now you could say, and then that's what they broadly say, and I'm very much in sympathy with it. You need this substrate in order to have action, and also, and cognition is a form of action. It's a form of interaction with the environment, or it's a form of organismic activity in the end. So in order to have it, if this is the basis of action, and if action is the basis of cognition, you need this in order to have cognition. Okay, and so if a large language model would not have this structure, would not be built as such a system, well, it would be able to recreate patterns which are present in linguistic outputs and recombine them in all kinds of creative ways, even perhaps, but it would not do this in a cognitive way, right? Or in a way which would be cognitive for an organism. Mm-hmm. Yep. Action. That's all about language. But sorry, there are typos because I was so rushed. Lacking the substrate, it doesn't really show in these language systems because they're all about output. All you see from Claude is the sentences that Claude produces, right? There's only the output. You don't see Claude. But if you would have if you have an acting robot, the output and the thing that generates that generates the output, or from which it is an output, it cannot be so easily separated as in the case of language. Okay, so the material thing and its output sort of coincide, are the same thing. They can't be clearly distinguished, and that is why I think that a different material structural organization might give different results concerning your two tests, right? You can't do it all with output, because the output is the motion, or is the movement in the action. Okay. Okay. Now I'll come to ecological laws, and then I that's all I have for the ecological laws, because I wasn't sure what you were going to say. Can they allow? That's a question you do ask, to overcome structural differences, or do they make a difference? when it comes to the structural differences between machines and organisms? Well, here's one first thing that I want to say. It is possible, and it's very reasonable, I think. And you mentioned this article by Turvey in which he talks about dynamics and self-organization as being essentially or tightly connected to ecological laws. You could say ecological laws have to do with what matters for an organism for its life purposes, right? So if you take this view on ecological laws, you do connect ecological laws to something that lives, or something that has a perspective. And you could say, along the enactivist lines, that in order to have this perspective, you need to have this kind of organization, right? So any humanoid robot that would not have this kind of organization, would not have this organismic, lifey substructure, would, for them, the notion of ecological laws would not make sense at all. Because there's no, if you lack this structure, if you lack this natural teleology, then you're, you don't have ecological laws. Ecological laws, one could add, which are your ecological laws. Think about it. Humanoid robots are, of course, like LLMs and like computers, they are late technological products. We made them. And we could make them without them having this teleological structure, but we could make them to respond and act in the light of our ecological laws. We can make robots, and that's what these woman-like humanoid robots, which you showed at the end, that's exactly what they do. They are not sensitive to their own ecological laws, one could say. They are sensitive to our ecological laws, and they generate the kinds of responses which we would generate when we were encountering such laws. But again, this would mean that you would have some kind of output equivalence, not way of dealing with output. Output equivalence. Okay, so you could say they would deal with ecological laws, but not their own ecological laws, and their way of dealing with those laws would be very different from the way in which we deal with those laws. This opens up or invites another question. Could you not have humanoid robots with the right autopoietic, autonomous structure? Could you not create that out of perhaps non-organic material? Well, I have no idea. That's a different question, and that might change the situation. But I would first want to see how it's done before I draw any firm conclusions about it. Mm-hmm. There's something, perhaps one more thing that I want to say, if I can. No, that's basically it. Yeah. I hope that was clear enough.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you, Erik. I tend to agree with most everything you said, except for two things. Once talking to Dennett, he suggests me I should forget the problem of origins, because inevitably we could get to the point where we should go to religions, who created us or what else. So the tendency to say that, okay, I agree that machines nowadays are the product of human creation, no doubt about that, but there is the phenomenon of emergence in the, according to the complex system, and this degree of emergence can vary and go very rapidly in the production of new invariants. And these invariants may be imposed into new kinds of what we call technological affordance. This technological affordance would be second, third degree of on the basis of ecological affordance, but they would be an emergent property that from systems with a certain degree of autonomy, because autonomy doesn't come from 0 and 1, it's a matter of degrees. So the machine would have, we have already machines with a certain degree of autonomy in that they can produce their movements independent of a controller, if we leave aside the problem of origins, which I tend to not ignore the problem of origins, but I think Dennis is right. Let's think about independent of who creates or what is the state of the system now. The system now with this physical AI is that it has an interaction and a dependence on human affordance, but it seems possible that they will create the second level affordance, that's technological affordance. And that would make a big difference. Mariana and I participate in several congresses on ecological psychology, and not by chance, people from robotics are there, because they are interested in invariants. And they are talking about all the time, which ecological people agree, that we have affordance in the structure of light. We have several invariants that are there at the physical level as well. Invariants in the light, invariants in the touch, in the soil, they are the base, physical base of affordance. And then we need to see the emergent levels that leave aside parts of the physical laws, but physical laws should not be ignored. They are there all the time. So my suspicions is, and that is what I'm investigating at the moment, is that if we leave aside the problem of origins, we could consider the possibility that these humanoid robots can increase their degrees of autonomy in the sense that they can produce, grasp information available in their surroundings, in the interaction with humans and other animals, and they can produce different niches. And we can see that a friend of us talking about the gaze of eyes from people now looking at the screen all the time, that it's affecting their affordance in accordance with the second degrees affordance. People changing their skin, their head, their hair, and all this because of the interaction with machines. So I think that different materials and the structure, I agree, might result in a very different, might produce very different results. And the point is that we don't know what would be the difference, the very big difference. What happened, what is going on now, and that this area of humanoid robotics and physical AI is growing very, very, very quickly. And it seems to me that philosophers should think about this development. And as for the question, if they can allow to overcome the structural difference between machines and organisms, I believe that life will win. So the structural difference between machines and organisms would be there always. But the midway resulting from the emergence properties of complex systems, that is what we are going to have to study from the next few years, if not decades. So thanks for your answer. I like it very much, and we tend to agree in many points. Okay, thank you, Erik.
Thank you. Yeah, it's time, I think, and I would just add one sentence. Yeah, I want to be maximally open-minded about this and not say too much a priori. So, yeah, and that's some of the things you say now. That aligns with many of the things you say now. Yeah, but that's the end of my comments.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Erik.
Maybe Andrea, do you want to make any kind of remark or question? Now you're hearing me. I think so.
Mariana, quer fazer alguma pergunta?
Yes, I do. Maybe just a small remark on, just for expressing my skepticism about the capacity of machines to close the gap and do what organisms are able to do. As a contextualist, I use handshake as an example. A handshake may have some nucleus of sense, something like the expression of an open attitude, collaborative attitude in front of someone else. But between two people who have just a fight, it means reconciliation. Between Richard Nixon and Xu Enlai, it means that two superpowers finally will have regular diplomatic relationships. Between Maréchal Pétain and Adolf Hitler, it means shame and capitulation for a large part of the French people. So I doubt that a machine can have the right background to interpret correctly according to the context. Well, that's in the line of interpretations of Wittgenstein. Charles Travis has it that in the Wittgenstein's perspective, it is almost impossible to separate what has been said from the context of the utterance. And so I think, well, robotics has a program, and we cannot decide a priori to close the door. That it's impossible. Things seem impossible until they are done. And so, but I have some skepticism about the possibility to close the gap between machines and organisms. That's just a small remark.
Can I say something, Andrea?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. I wish you are right. As you know me, I strongly hope you're right. And I agree with you that the correct context, machines are not dealing properly with that. But particularly with the collaborative aspects, people who work with robotics believes that in the future, the robots, humanoid robots, would be developed especially to collaborate with people with old age and all these, and collaborative elements will be there. I am very skeptical about this. I think that is the notion of context. It has long millions of years, and we don't just put in a pill for robots. But it seems to me that the emergence phenomena, again, is generating a new kind of affordance that people are really involved in that. I decided almost to start a little bit of illusions and magic to understand why people are so involved and impressed with this new emergence. But I hope you are right, and thank you.
Erik, you want to comment on that?
I certainly would endorse the Wittgensteinian view, which pointing to the circumstances as a very important ingredient in mentality, and connecting mentality to the circumstances in which it operates. All the circumstances is very appealing to me and convincing to me. Yeah, but still, well, yeah, I also want not to be too much of an a priori thinker. But in print, my heart is with the Wittgensteinian contextualist view. Absolutely, 100%, 99.9%.
Just a small question to Maria Eunice. In your presentation, you use you define affordance many times as meaningful information. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of understand the point. I see how meaningful it is to talk about meaningful information there. But then I was thinking, when you talk about meaningful information, my cat is jumping on the I kind of, maybe it's necessary, but not sufficient to understand many things of affordance. And I'm trying to stress the modal nature of affordance, the nature of to perceive directly a possibility or opportunity to act. I don't know how meaningful information connects with this modality of to perceive directly, and I think this modality is important to naturalize it. So when animals are engaging with the environment, they kind of engage with possibilities as well. Maybe can you? And sometimes meaningful information looks like to be redundant in a sense, because I have difficulty to imagine information which is not meaningful. Just a remark to clarification. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you for your question, Marcos. My understanding, meaningful information is the basis of affordance. But you can think it in terms of dispositions, as Turvey does, dispositions that only become meaningful in a specific context. That is a relational property that has to be instantiated. And the modality then comes into this positional perspective, I think, in this sense that outside of this attunement, the information is just there as a structure, like the invariants in the light, environments in the movement, but it it only becomes meaningful when an action is performed. So, for instance, if we are not creatures that walk into the earth, but we live in the water, this invariance of the earth would be meaningless to us in a sense. We would have to grasp other elements in these modalities. So I agree with you, and that's we go on to the ontological aspect of information, which Mariana and I disagree. I think there is a level in which information is have to be thought in terms of invariant structural level. That's not material. It's not meaningful itself, but only becomes materialized either in material elements or becomes meaningful when it's incorporated. But at the ontological level, there is no need to specify this element that is required, that is acquired at the action level. I don't know if I answered your question. I'm much more Platonic than Aristotelian when we go on to the ontological level of information. They need some material elements to be instantiated, but we don't break information with the hammer. We don't break information. We don't put information in the rock. We need material elements to then break them if we want. But that's a different level, ontological level. Thank you.
Interesting. Yeah. Thank you, Maria Eunice. So next week, we're going to have the opportunity to talk about it. I'll be in Marília with you in person. So we'll talk more about the Platonistic and also Aristotelian way of dealing with affordances.
Plato would not agree with me, but I don't care. I'm in the middle of Plato and Aristotle.
And Gibson would not agree with the Platonian.
But Turvey would do, not a Platonic.
I know.
But it depends on if we are talking at the ontological level or at the epistemological level. If we are talking at the epistemological level, it's a different matter. If we're talking at the ontological level, that few people think about that, and Turvey thought very deeply and ended up dying a few months ago, saying that he had no answer about the ontological level, nature of information. And that's, I think, the Platonic view would help us a little bit if we don't have a prejudice against it.
We're gonna.
You could take that as a reductio of Turvey too. But
so we're gonna end this session with this Platonic remark by Professor Eunice and this radical backlash by Erik. Okay.
I think Plato is radical, not me.
Yes, I agree, but just remind Wiener, it says information is information, is not matter, is not energy. And we say, what is it then? We have to be open-minded to inquire about it. Well, at the ontological level.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So next workshop is going to be on Platonistic, Aristotelian ways of dealing with information affordances. Okay, that's the idea.
Great.
Let's do it. Let's organize something like that. Okay, guys, we are on time. Not just 5 minutes later. That's nothing for us. Let's make some pause. 5 minutes for water, toilet, and then we come back to the final presentation of this morning with Professor André Leclerc. Okay, so 5 minute break.
Okay.
Aparecendo lá na tela, né?
Eu vou te...
Fred, você... André, você gostaria de subir o seu slide ou você quer que a gente faça isso? Tá. Ok, já tá.
Eu consegui, também. Ou alguém fez por mim. Parece
Beleza.
mágico.
Se você não tiver no comando dos slides, você pede para a gente ir trocando o slide assim que você...
Ok. Então eu vou fazer sinais cabalísticos para pedir
como a gente aprendeu,
a transição.
Como a gente aprendeu, a informação está em todo lugar, independente das nossas ações. Você pode fazer, aí vai ter que fazer uma ação, né, para a gente fazer. Ok, let's go back to the final presentation of this morning session of our workshop, Colloquium on this critical reception of Myin's new book called Of a Different Mind. It's a great pleasure to have André Leclerc here. He's one of the most influential philosophers here in Brazil. It's very important for the discussion here in philosophy of language, philosophy of mind. I'm very proud to have you here, and also thankful for all your leadership. André Leclerc was also the former president of the Brazilian Society for Analytical Philosophy. So I really know now how hard it can be. And I thank you very much for everything that you did for our community here in Brazil. Okay, André will talk about agency and higher order cognition, comments on Erik Myin's Of a Different Mind. So the floor is yours, André. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You all hear me? Yeah? Okay. So let's do it. First, Marcus, I appreciate the invitation to comment Erik's book, Of a Different Mind, and it has been an opportunity for me to learn a lot about, especially about radical inactivism. So you can. I'm in command. There, great. Okay. First, congratulations, Erik, for the book. It's, in my opinion, much more than a simple introduction to the philosophy of mind. It goes far beyond that. It is an introduction of the kind opinionated introduction. There is an editor in Boulder, Colorado, that published a series of opinionated introduction. For instance, David Mamet Armstrong wrote Mind Body Problem, an opinionated introduction. And the opinion of the author especially appears in the last chapters, but not only in the last chapter. The historical overview presented in the book is by far the best and most complete overview in the philosophy of mind I ever read. So congratulations. It's a great contribution, achievement. And the book, the selection of the authors and doctrines presented as a purpose to show how the enactivist program appears so important at the end of the intellectual overview or trajectory. The main theories of mind are presented and interpreted in chronological order, and they provide the reader with deep insights. I am especially happy with the presence of Thomas Reid in that overview, a philosopher I admire for many reasons. Reid was one of the precursors of agent causation in the philosophy of action. He has a very interesting, innovative treatment of disposition, and in the philosophy of language, he has contributions like the introduction of the social operation of the mind. Many operation of the mind presupposes the existence of other people. So they are social on this respect. So I really appreciate it. That's the best and more complete overview on mind that I have ever read. That is not so relevant, but I want briefly to situate myself philosophically. Well, as you already know, I endorse contextualism in the philosophy of language. Externalism seems to me the right way to individuate mental content. Many of our mental states, acts, or events to be fully individuate we must consider individuating relations with elements of the surrounding, especially mental acts, mental events, mental states that we express literally and sincerely by using indexicals. I am also very sympathetic to the anti-intellectualist tradition in philosophy, especially Wittgenstein, Ryle, and Merleau-Ponty. Merleau-Ponty, an author regularly quoted by an activist. I discovered that recently. But when it comes to an activist, I consider myself still a newcomer. I have read a lot, but I still consider myself a newcomer. I have written an introduction to the philosophy of mind a few years ago, and the second edition has been released last year with new chapters, and there is a chapter on enactivism and ecological psychology, but I asked the help of a good friend, Eros Moreira, to write the large part of it. So I see and activism as a natural development of that line of thought, the anti-intellectualist line of thought represented by the second Wittgenstein, Ryle, and Merleau-Ponty. I also regard myself as a modest naturalist. I do not expect intentionality or consciousness to be reducible to behavior or neural states. Yet I take intentional concepts to be essential for a full account of the world we live in. I take seriously dispositions. As Alban Noé once said, we are creatures of habits. Without habits, without disposition in general, our mental life would be miserable. But I still defend conceptual analysis, like Frank Jackson. I think it is a matter of intellectual responsibility. We must always try to know exactly what we are talking about. And through conceptual analysis, this is something that can be, I think, helpful. And I do not believe that I am my brain. So I'm not a brain centrist. I don't know if the word exists in English, but I think it is clear enough what I want to say. Well, my main concern is agency, both at the level of basic mind and that of deliberation and planning. My remarks may look a bit familiar in the stuff I have read on in activism. The scope objection appears regularly. And activism is presented by its critics as giving a strong, powerful account of basic minds, the interaction in perception and action immediately with the immediate surroundings. But some people, the critics, believe that it is not as simple when it comes to higher order cognition. So I will focus on this in the next minute. Here, the title of the slide, remember the title of the chapter in Word and Object by Quine, a flight from intentions with an S, i.e., what we have is a flight from representation, but here a representation in the sense of an object. In this respect, an activism offers a rich description of organism-environment interaction, which does not involve representations. Representation has an ambiguity between the result of the process of representing and the very process of representing. Brentano's use of the word representation, for instance, stands for the act of representing, and not for something like an image or representation in the sense of the result that would be present in the mind of the cognitive agent. So I agree with the atom to reject reification. I remember a paper, I do not remember exactly which one. Davidson says that we never have something like a proposition in front of the highest mind, the highest of the mind. No phenomenology would confirm something like that. So I stand with Dewey and Erik on that score. And then I remember Quine in the Library of Living Philosophers. Quine says that he cannot accept belief, desire, intention. But he says that believing, desiring, intending are all okay. In his answer to Peter Frederick Strawson. So it took me times to understand what exactly it was he meant with that declaration. But now I think I can make sense of it. As I said, I will focus on actions and plans. All action takes place within the environment we inhabit. The difficulty, in my view, is that most action are parts of broader plans. I take the notion of a plan to be central to action theory. A plan or a future-directed intention, in Bratman's term, is a representation. It has conditions of satisfaction and an internal criterion of success. When I form a plan, I already know what would count as success. The same is true in general for attitudes, cognitive or cognitive. But this does not mean that we have to admit representation as an object, floating is somehow in the mind, or things like that. Once a plan is formed, it gives rise to many subordinated intentions, each activated at the appropriate time and under the appropriate circumstances. These are operational intentions, the intention on which we actually act. I used the idea of operational intention from a paper by Christer Zegerberg on the logic of deliberate action. I don't know why, but the logic of action has been developed mainly in Scandinavia, in Sweden and Norway. This is where we find the most important logician of action. They are more specific than the plan itself, but still relatively abstract. When we form a future-directed intention, that future-directed intention determined subordinated intentions And these subordinated intentions are more specific, but they are still relatively abstract. And I found in a paper by Juan Pablo Bermudez a question that I think extremely relevant here. He says, I quote, how can agents transform their abstract and coarse-grained intentions into the highly context-sensitive, fine-grained control processes required to select, revise, and correct strategies during self-control exertions? I believe this is precisely where enactivism can make a major contribution. Enactivists insist on the continuum life-mind, but there must be also, it seems to me, a continuity between the basic mind and higher order cognition. After all, the living agent that changes his or her position to hit the ball in a tennis match is the same living agent with a plan to earn the trophy and the championship award as a means to buy a car and please his or her mother. There must be a way to close the gap. An activity like driving a car, going to the university, playing a tune on a guitar, etc. An activity can be analyzed as a sequence of actions, and each action can be in turn analyzed in routines and subroutines, movement fully dominated by the agent. They correspond to what has been called habitual actions, which are manifestations of disposition acquired in a lifelong learning process through training and repetition. Habitual actions do not need prior deliberation and choice among open options. They are almost automatic. When I have to open a door as part of a plan to get out and take the car, I do not have to think twice as to the way to grab the button of the door and to twist it in a certain way and then to pull the door. I'm a good door opener. I have a good routine for that. And I do not have to get involved in deliberation and choice to do something like that. Without these routines and sub-routines, basic actions and rationality would be impossible. We could never achieve a plan by acting according to our best judgment. Some plans are repetitive, others are completely new. Every time I go to the University of Brasilia, I carry out a series of habitual actions as part of my plan to get there and teach a class. Yet the plan remains the same each day I go to the university. I take the same route and do not spend time looking for a better one. I do not need to think twice because I already know the best way to get there. By contrast, when plans are new, they call for higher order cognition, the ability to deliberate, to choose among open alternatives, and to represent what is not immediately present in one's surroundings. This is what we do when we face new situations. And this happens regularly. Plans resist to reconsiderations, but they allow for a judgment here and there. The two features of rational behavior identified by Descartes are present. As rational agents, we can respond appropriately to unfamiliar situation. So novelty and appropriateness come together in this open-ended capacity for adaptive innovation. Still, our rationality has its limits. Sometimes we contradict ourselves, and we cannot construct very long chain of valid inferences. Still, our rationality has sorry. In spite of these limits of our rationality, we have that capacity to act appropriately in new situation, and that ability presupposes to represent possible scenarios. However, this does not oblige us to admit representations as objects manipulated somehow by an autonomous agent. What we do when we specify the mental content of an agent's attitudes, we simply use a sentence in a public language, trying to respect as far as possible the cognitive perspective of the agent. But this is negotiable. William Lycan gave a funny example of a professor of history saying to his class, Columbus believed that Castro's island was just a few miles of the continent. Well, in that case, the professor made himself quite clear. He will be understood by the whole class, but of course, Columbus did not have to how to know that the island in question would come to be called Castro's Island. In other circumstances, for instance, a president suffering on an impeachment trial. Here, it's extremely important to try to respect the cognitive perspective of the agent. We all want to know how the president represents himself, the event or facts that lead him to be accused. So if we adopt that pragmatic strategy, we do not have to admit linguistic representation, either in the brain or the mind of the agent. I will, but be that as it may, the notions of action and agency are presupposed all the time in Erik's book, even when it comes to perception, and it's quite all right. But what is an action? We have an intuitive concept of action, but sometimes people get confused about it. I remember Daniel Wegner in The Illusion of Conscious Will declaring that our actions happen to us. Most philosophers of action, of course, will find that observation completely absurd. Here, my commitment to conceptual analysis lead me to try to delimitate that intuitive concept of action. I don't know if it's the right strategy. I remember les Messieurs de Port-Royal in their Logique ou l'art de penser, who says that the word idea is so clear, understood by everyone in the same way, etc., that it would be foolish to try to define the word idea, or what an idea is. Maybe the same would apply with actions. I don't know. The more I got experience in philosophy, the less dogmatic I feel. I think that our intuitive concept of action requires a high level of autonomy. When it comes to new plans, that level of autonomy may be especially high. Perhaps the continuum life, mind already includes something like free will. This is what Kevin Mitchell tries to show. I quote, this is a recent book by Kevin Mitchell, Free Agents, How Evolution Gave Us Free Will. Though it is not often described as such, I claim that agency, the capacity of organism to act with causal power in the world, is the defining trait of life itself. It is, moreover, the bedrock on which we can build an understanding of free will in humans. And a bit later, he writes, the story of agency is the story of life itself. An action cannot be a simple link in the causal chain. I agree with Ellen Stewart that hard determinism, a la Ted Underich, for instance, is inconsistent with agency and the very concept of action. Perhaps free will is a condition of intelligibility of behavior in general. Autonomy can be a matter of degrees. I think this is how Leibniz envisaged that matter. In a section of Nouveaux essais sur l'entendement humain, he explained in very simple terms that, as an humorist in my country, in Canada, once said, it is better to be rich and healthy than poor and sick. Of course, a man rich and healthy has much more opportunity, much more capacity and opportunity than most people. So he has a greater degree of autonomy, and depending on your capacities and the opportunities, you can reach high degree of autonomy. Well, thank you for your time and your attention. I will
Okay, thank you very much. Can I
Erik,
have my slides again? Okay.
I'm not hearing you.
Can't you hear me? No? I just got a message that that the host has unmuted me. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Marcus, can you hear me?
Hi guys, Erik.
Now I can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can hear you very well. I think sometimes André Leclerc has some problems with his computer or device there. Maybe André can do again this to exit and then return. If something gets wrong, we can do this. If it's okay now, we can continue. Okay, but Erik, you can go on. And
yeah, but I want André to hear me.
Of course, he's hearing.
Can you hear me?
You now.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
I think
Good.
there is some stability in his equipment sometimes,
Yeah.
but when that happens, Andrea, you try to make a sign for us, and you exit and come back, and then we kind of make things work in the backstage. Okay. Okay, guys.
Okay, so trusting that I can be heard. I start talking. Thank you very much, Andre, for the kind words you had at the beginning for my book. It's very nice to hear as an author, of course. And I'm delighted that you appreciated the stuff on Thomas Reid. I guess we could go on and talk for a few hours about how great Thomas Reid is. He is, but we can't stand still, and we can't do that now. I hope we can do so in the future. I have prepared some slides based on the text which I got yesterday. Again, this is relatively quick, and it sort of covers some stuff which I've talked about, overlaps a little bit with what I've talked about in the some of the previous interventions, but that's all fine. I think it's connected. I can't deal with everything you say, but most of it, I think I have something to say about. You talk about rationality. And that was also a concern that was in Marco's talk. Now, what is rationality? It's such a and it's such an elevated status in philosophy, but the way I like to think of rationality is in terms of, and it's not explicitly in the book, but it's all consistent with it, and it's the kind of thinking, the attitude, which makes me say this is in the book. For me, rationality is about connecting facts, like the independent of a description of those facts. I've talked about this when I reacted to Marcos. So when an animal flees because it smells volatile organic compounds, which is stuff that emerges when things start burning, when organic things start burning. And when it flees, it connects the fact of the volatile organic compound and the fire that is coming. I gave the example, and Marcos gave it himself, of a chimpanzees that go termite hunting, and I gave the example of a chimpanzee choosing between two sticks, and when it chooses for the right stick, and uses that to go on termite fishing, it is connecting facts. It's connecting the length of the stick with its potential to be a good instrument to get a lot of termites, right? And to do that, to connect facts in a way which respect the order between facts, which facts, the happening of one fact conditional on the happening of the other fact, is a kind of rationality for me. Okay, but it's independent of being able to describe these connections between facts, and I trust, and I think that's a trust of a lot of the program, the anti-intellectualist program in philosophy and now in embodied cognition, is that you can have that kind of rationality, this kind of good connection, adaptive connection, working connection of facts without having descriptions of these facts, right? That's not intellectualist. It's unlike the traditional characterization of rationality, in which rationality is something special, a mark of the mental, sometimes very, very famously in Descartes, but in many other thinkers, the mechanistic thinkers from which were talked about earlier today, they take this rationality, this kind of high-level rationality as a mark of the mental, but it's a rationality that is based on modeled on dealing with abstract things, mathematics, sentences, inferring, connecting sentences, being sensitive to connections between facts by being sensitive to connections between descriptions. Okay, my characterization is based in action, right? If you look at the previous slide, it's about connecting facts. That's an active thing, something organisms do in a certain way. Okay, so if this anti-traditional, anti-intellectualist characterization of rationality by means of action, connecting facts, is correct, the origins of rationality lie in action. Connecting is a kind of doing. This brings us to the question: to what is action? And what is action? The question which was raised in your talk also, but I've linked it now to the question: what is rationality? Right? Because rationality, being rational, is grounded in action. What is action? Well, I already shown this picture. I agree with original and activism, or I largely agree with original and activism, that sees a link, or that grounds action in the autopoietic, autonomous activity of living organisms. Living organisms are these systems that of which components constantly reproduce themselves by a special kind of interconnectedness between the components of the process. The one process produces the next process, and the next process is needed for the first process. So you have this kind of circularity, which, as I said, Kant already wrote about and marked as a typical feature of organisms. Okay, if you have such a structure, well, you have you get a teleological structure for free. You have a goal there. The system is it's in its operation. It's trying to perpetuate itself. So you already have this essential element of an action. A goal towards the action is directed. You also have a perspective. You have the perspective of the system in its environment. The perspective of the system is its own self recreation, and it provides a perspective on the environment that the system is in, because some things, some kinds of stuff in the environment, some kinds of interactions with the environment, they contribute to the prolonged existence, and other things don't. They run counter to it, or they run counter to the function, to the well-being of the system. Okay, so you have everything there to anchor actions, and I largely agree with this line of thinking. So you can ground basic rationality in basic action. Okay, what it requires is structural features, but also but you can then make it more complex, or you can see how it can become more complex, or you can see what gives you rationality, because you only have rationality if you connect facts, but you need to be sensitive to facts. You need to have sensors or what you have, and you need to have ways to engage or to produce well, to engage with the environment, to make changes in it, to do things with your body, etc. Okay. So you need what I call sensitivities. You need sensitivities to specific properties, facts, and relations. Okay, but these are just ways in which you are sensitive to what happens in the world in relation to you. And again, you can have these sensitivities. I talked about this yesterday. You can have these sensitivities without having a capacity to describe what you are sensitive for. We can describe, just like what you said in the talk. We humans can describe these sensitivities in terms of sentence. We can say the animal flees because it smells those, what are them again? The VOX, the volatile organic compounds, because it smells the volatile organic compounds, or because it smells the smoke. It runs because it expects the fire. That's what we can say, but the animal needn't be able to say that to itself in order to have the kind of sensitivity to the things that are described by our description. Okay. Okay. Human rationality. That's all basic rationality. Human rationality, I think, is characterized by not only a sensitivity to facts and relations and properties, but also a sensitivity to descriptions of properties, facts, and relations. So we can not only be sensitive to the relation, the factual relation between smoke and fire and run, but we can also be sensitive to the description of that relation. Someone can tell us, if there's smoke, there's fire. And we can be sensitive, because we're sensitive to that description, we can be sensitive to the factual relation. Someone can tell you, without you having any experience or any reaction to smoke, if you smell smoke, something like this, for example, you should run because there's a fire coming. You could only, on the basis of having this description, have the right attitude or create the right attitude to run when you smell the smoke. Okay, so you can be sensitive to the relation via a sensitivity to a description of the relation, right? And that's what makes or that adds, of course, something. But on the other hand, well, I'll say it's in this. It's as illustrated by this Magritte painting. At the same time, this sensitivity to descriptions is two-layered. You're indirectly also sensitive to facts by being sensitive to descriptions. There's a subtlety there, and I told you before, and I tell you, and I'm going to write on that. It's a very confusing thing, and philosophers have been, and scientists have been very confused by it. So it needs a little bit of conceptual work, I think. Okay, this two-layered sensitivity. But it's good to realize that it's two-layered. Okay, so many philosophical approaches, traditional approaches, they only recognize this descriptive kind of rationality, specifying rationality. And that could be a ground to deny that animals can be rational agents. Okay, Davidson takes this stance, I think, clearly in his work. But you can avoid that. You can grant animals their intelligence, their smartness, their rationality. Yes, rationality, their basic rationality, but basic not in a sense in which it's worse or so, just different. It's a different kind, and it can be the animals can have by their non-descriptive sensitivities can be in many contexts much smarter than we are. So if you recognize the specificity of the rationality of animals, or the specificity of basic rationality, you can do justice to the smartness of animals. You can embrace that animal can be rational agents, and you can endorse that they can engage in goal-directed activities just because they are living systems with specific sensitivities that can adapt their actions in relation to their goals and to what they are sensitive to in the world. Okay, so basic agency can be both rational and structure. And how can we explain it? Well, I think we can explain by the phylogeny and ontogeny of animals that allows them to engage in structured actions. They can do A in order to do B, to do C, etc. And you can have all of that stuff without this ability to describe. All of this you can do without needing a blueprint or a plan. You just it's not you need apparently empirically a kind of phylogeny and a kind of ontogeny. Right, that's the claim, and that's the claim of the anti-intellectualist embodied and active tradition in philosophy, I think. Okay, but what about specifying rationality? What about the topic you raise in your intervention or in your reaction? What about acting with an explicit plan? How is that possible? How does it work? You raise both questions, I think. Well, how is it possible? Again, I don't think it's logically sound to say that it is possible because it is there. You want to explain it. You don't want to explain it by itself, right? So if you want to explain how we can be sensitive to relations in descriptions, and via that sensitivity have indirect sensitivity to facts, you can't ground that on the sensitivity to descriptions yourself. You can only give an explanation if you ground it in something simpler, something more basic. What's the more basic thing you can ground it? Well, simply basic rationality, basic sensitivities. Translated into Rileyan terms, this means that knowing that so-called propositional knowledge, in the end, ultimately is a form of knowing how. It is a form of what kind of knowing how? A very specific form. I think it has to do with social practices, with communication practices, with dialoguing, with what we call in the books with engaging in truth-telling practice. All these kinds of things. We see them happening all the time when we see children grow up. All these kinds of things are ways in which, from only specific sensitivities, human organisms acquire the capacity to acquire the capacity for specifying sensitivities. Okay, and you see it in ontogeny, and I think you can see we have enough. We can be confident that you can tell a good enough phylogenetic story too. We can. There's no in principle hurdle, and even there's much work already done in explaining it, tracing the natural origins of that capacity in humans. But it's an achievement. It's something that was not there from the beginning, but can be built based on basic rationality, right? And here you have the link which you wanted between higher order cognition and lower order cognition. Well, the one ultimately is a form of the other, but a specific form, right? It's a special capacity. You can have it on the basis of more basic capacities, but only if you follow a certain path. just like you can become a very accomplished piano player only if you follow a certain path. You have to exercise, you have to go to school, you have to have peers. If you don't do that, you will never have it. It's the same, I think, with our capacity for specifying descriptive rationality. How does it work? You raise that question. Well, in an everyday context, it's a question: how can I, when I conceive of an abstract plan, how can I connect it with action, with concrete action? Well, I think that in a very ordinary context, in an everyday context, when you pose that question in a concrete form, it doesn't pose any special problems. Suppose I translate it, or I put the question, or I pour it in this concrete form. Someone wants to become a philosophy graduate. Well, is it a major intellectual problem to answer the question, how could that possibly work? No, we can answer that very easily. How that plan can be realized. Well, the person should enroll in a philosophy program at a university, should get the description of the program, should get the hours of the classes, should take the bus to get there, etc. It's not an exciting narrative that I'm giving, but this just shows that how easy we can answer that question if we pose it in a natural context, in an everyday context. So if philosophers, and I'm not saying that you're saying that, Andre, but I was wondering, what kind of question is that? How can the plan be? And why is that a deep philosophical question? A way in which I can see how you could construe such a question as posing an enormous intellectual challenge would be how it would become intractable is again to give a Platonic twist on it. The question becomes intractable or something like it if one has an absolute conception of the plan as something abstract. If you think that way about the plan, if you think the plan really is abstract, then you inherit all the problems of how does the really abstract connect to the concrete natural world, which we talked about today also. It's the same question for someone who takes abstract as really being about abstract objects. How can these abstract knowledge operate in knowledge about the world? Well, I don't think there is an answer to that question. What needs to be done with this question is not straightforwardly answering, but in a Wittgensteinian way, I think, dissolve it. Again, I think continuous or in resonance with the thinking of not only Wittgenstein, but Dewey and Reid, all these thinkers point to a strategy which comes down to something like this. Well, don't see abstract planning as something intrinsically abstract in itself, as some kind of based on an abstract object, but see it as something which is itself an abstraction from something which is concrete. Okay, abstract planning is a concrete activity, but we can sort of take an abstract stance towards that planning. We can abstract from it, and we can nominalize the plan when we talk about the activity of planning, as you showed. And if you go too far in nominalizing and reifying and abstractizing and making it Platonic real, then you create these problems. But if you go the other way, and if you see this abstraction as a human activity of human activities, then you have you have from the beginning grounded in or placed them in the concrete, and you will never again have the problem of reconnecting them to the concrete because they were there from the beginning. Okay, and that's exactly what the story about ability to specify as based on specific abilities give you. It shows you that the planning capacity is not really abstract, well, in a sense, which creates these philosophical problems, but it allows to see how it is connected from the beginning with the concrete activities of concrete creatures, organisms. It is in the concrete activity to begin with. It never needs to descend from a Platonic heaven to the material concrete world. Okay, I'm finishing. Just one slide. I would like to talk more about it, but I have to be short. Well, what's so if specifying is ultimately a form, if knowing that is ultimately a form of knowing how, why even bother with having knowing that? Well, no, the good thing about one of the good things is about being able to or being able to be sensitive to descriptions is that it allows us to do something fantastic, namely rule-based teaching. I can tell you all kinds of things, and you can act with respect to those things just because you have heard my story about them. You don't need to have been in touch with exactly the kinds of regularities that I tell you about in order to act appropriately. I can tell you to flee from this, to flee when you smell the smoke, even if you never have seen, have yourself connected the smoke to the fire, right? We can transmit enormous amounts of learned abilities because sensitivities to specific stuff, because we are able to describe them. Okay, so one person can describe the sensitive what the person has learned in terms of specific stuff by specifying it and give it to another person who need not have acquired that knowledge by the concrete contact with the specific things itself. Basically, that's it. Okay, and that's something that's emphasized by people like Henrich and Lala in their writings on cultural evolution. But it was an idea that was developed and very well, I think, by Skinner. He makes a distinction between rule-based behavior, which is based on descriptions, and behavior which is based contingency-based, which is based on direct experience with regularities. Finally, and that's really the last thing I say, specifying, we should not go again the way of overestimating the role of specifying abilities. It's rationality, specifying rationality. It helps us in a lot of ways, but it always needs to be embedded into with our specific knowledge. One, very quickly, if you read the book The Secret, it's a terrible title, but it's a great book by Henrich. One of the first chapters is about the lost discoverers. It's about explorers who went to places where indigenous people could survive easily, but they the spirit of the times was that they were so much more rational than those indigenous people. But without the help of these indigenous people, they all died. So they had, perhaps they were better in inferring and in having theories about the physical world, but they lacked the specific connection between their concrete knowledge, their non-specifying knowledge of the world, in order to apply it. I'm just giving a sketch. Read it. It's very good. But it shows you, I think, somewhat the limits of specifying. Still, specifying gives us specific capacities. They make us special, not super, not incomparable. Well, not intelligent while animals are smart. We're both intelligent in our own ways, and each of our ways has its specificities. I will suffice with that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Erik. You're hearing me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I use rationality in the sense of making adjustments in the environment. This can be done in different ways. In the case of planning and the question of abstract intentions. Some intentions are more abstract than other. You get in a store with the intention to buy a perfume or a book for your wife, for instance. And after looking at the book, you decide to buy a perfume. So the intention to buy a perfume is more specific than the intention you had when you get in the store. I think yeah, the idea of specifying is quite important. I believe that what we do when we specify the when we specify the mental content of an agent is just using a sentence of a public language, and we do that according to the circumstances. It is negotiable. But the idea of specifying in this way does not oblige you to introduce representations of any kind. When I say that a plan is a representation, it has conditions of satisfaction. When we form a plan, you have already a knowledge, Anscombe would say a knowledge without observation, of what would count as success. And well, the sentence you use as a semantics, and this is how you, using the semantics of that sentence, you specified the content of the mental content of the agent without any obligation to accept the idea that there are in the mind of the agent something like a representation as an object. You know? So that's a pragmatic strategy. I think it's working. You know? But I will reflect on your strategy to characterize rationality from bottom top with the idea of specifying. And maybe at the end of this year, I will contact a few people responsible for journals in philosophy, and we will have more one opportunity to discuss all this stuff. Thank you for your answer, and I wish you big success with your book. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, guys. Mariana, Maria Eunice, do you have any remark or questions, or I don't know, want to say something?
Not really. Just say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Exactly. Thank you all, and congratulations for the discussion and the presentations.
It was a very good morning.
Yes.
In Brazil, at least.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Erik, just a remark. Sorry. I can't help it. Yeah. So going back to rationality, it's just
I know what you're gonna say. I think, yeah.
Yeah. I tend to agree with so many things that you say. But the things that you're pointing at are not to say a word, a concept which is important for what we are doing in logic. Your point is not incompatible with my point. So my point concerning your sensitivity account, I think is very interesting, yeah, and also the levels that we are doing. I can agree with many things. Also, on a non-descriptive necessity. I mean, we do not need descriptions to go through these specifications of that you are presenting now for us. But then I come back for the point when you're introducing the notion of rationality, you say they are a matter of connecting facts. And this connecting facts without descriptions, and I go with you, and that is pretty much naturalizable and continuous to other species, non-human species as well. There's no need to put a highly intellectual demanding of a full-blown language or prepositional language to do that. But my point is, it's not just connecting facts. This is necessary, but it's not sufficient for rationality when I'm trying to think about inferential relations here. What I mean, some facts are incompatible with other facts. They cannot be both together realizable. And it's important for rationality, this kind of relation and if you got incompatibility between facts, you got a notion of inference and a notion of negation as well. Not a formal negation, not a formal inference, but a way to deal with what follows from what when there is a fact. This is important for me because these facts are organized. The facts are complex in a sense. They are structured in a sense. And organisms can navigate pretty well. And it's a kind of know-how among all these structural things, and also in terms of incompatibility. Well, let's take a look at your first example of the chimpanzees with the stick. You see, I think chimpanzees, I totally agree with you. That's the kind of example of rationality that we want in activism and also naturalizable. But you see that chimpanzees, as a know-how, they navigate as well incompatibilities there. For instance, material incompatibility. I do not have a different word for that, just to make a different distinction between formal and material ones. I'm not interested in the formal ones. I'm interested in the material ones. Both cannot be instantiated together. I mean, if the stick is too long, or if the stick is long, it's not small. And if the stick is rigid, it's not flexible or too flexible. Because flexible and rigid together is incompatible in a sense. If they put the stick down, that means that they are not putting the stick up. If there are so many ants there, there is no, it's not the case, or I don't know how to frame it, that there is just a small amount of ants there. So these experiences and specifications that you rightly point out, and I go through it without descriptions, they are organized in a sense. I don't know what kind of concept or word you want to use for that. I'm using inference. It's inferential connected or conceptually connected. I don't know how to frame it. And I say that I would like to naturalize material incompatibilities, and rationality depends not combining facts, just combining facts, but also perceiving directly incompatibilities, material incompatibilities. And if you give me this, I give you, with this inferentialist machinery, I can give you negation, and I can give you all the other stuff as well. Also conditions, conditionals in a sense. So that's my remark. If a prey is fast, it's not slow. If it's too distant, it's not close. These things are organized there. If it's high, it's not low. There is degrees of intensity. This is the kind of world that we navigate as animals. That's my point. Sorry for talking too much.
Okay, I'm gonna react briefly to this. You say, if you give me this, I'm not sure enough what you are exactly asking and whether I'm willing you to give what you are asking for. I have one hunch, but I need to find a way to formulate it crisply, and I'm just feeling a possibility myself there. I think, these incompatibilities, and that's logical truths. They are just always true.
No.
Well, we need to crystallize what we're arguing about.
What formal logic will give us is contradiction. I'm not talking about contradiction. I'm talking about the kind of dynamics of contrarieties. It's not difference. It's not just distinguishing. It's not distinction. It's distinction of incompatibles or contraries.
Right. But an two incompatible events can never happen. No, it can be both small and short. So what exactly is the distinction between that and contradiction? But we're not going to end this in a short time.
Yeah. You're totally right. But it's fascinating. Thank you very much. And I thank you, Erik, for your time. André Leclerc, Mariana.
Thank you. Thank everybody. Yeah, it's an honor for me to get so much attention from so many smart people.
Yeah, cool. And again, thank you for the students working on the backstage with us. Fred Andrade, Thiago Andrade, and also Bruno Luiz, who organized all the technological stuff here going on. And thank you again for Brazilian Society for Analytical Philosophy. And you see, André Leclerc, Maria Eunice, and Mariana Broens will be here in Recife in July. So we might have a chance, guys, to meet them in person in Recife the end of July here for the big conference, Congress of the Brazilian Society for Analytical Philosophy. Okay, guys. Tomorrow we come back with Giovanni Rolla and also again with Erik Myin for the third and final part of our workshop of a book which is not even 1 month old. That's cool. That's cool. Okay, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Erik.
Thank you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.